finally set to return to its spiritual home. The club was set up in 2002 when Wimbledon Football Club announced that they were moving to a new ground in Milton Keynes, where they would become known as the MK Dons. But a small group of Wimbledon fans wanted to keep the spirit of the original club alive, so they set up their own team in southwest London called AFC Wimbledon. And now they're hoping to return to their roots and move into London's newest stadium, a stone's throw from their old club's former ground. This is Kings Meadow. In 2002, Kingstonians Football Club allowed the newly formed AFC Wimbledon to play their early matches here in a lowly amateur league. Eric Samuelson was the finance director.
The very first league game we played was at Sandhurst. And I remember walking down, my memory is of walking down a sort of leafy path by a little stream and coming out into an open field. There was a single barrier around the pitch, bales of hay that some of our fans were standing on. I seem to remember the cameraman who filmed it was standing on top of one of the dugouts. And it was, blimey, this is a bit different from the Premier League with Wimbledon.
AFC Wimbledon now play in the Football League again and own the freehold to Kings Meadow. For the past year, they've also loaned the ground to Chelsea Ladies. Roman Abramovich's Chelsea want to buy the ground. This means that the Wombles could return home and afford a new stadium and play in Wimbledon once again.
We set some objectives, probably in our second year, and there were three principal ones. The first one was to stay in the ownership of fans, which is obviously a continuous one, still true. The second one was to get into the Football League, and the third one was to go home to Merton, the borough in which Wimbledon sits, and preferably to Wimbledon. We've continued with, we've achieved the first two, and the third one was to go home to Wimbledon. We were approached about 5 years ago by the owners of the land to say, would we be interested in developing a sports stadium there as part of a joint development? 600-odd flats and a football stadium. And obviously we've been looking for a way to get back into Wimbledon, and the idea of going home to Plough Lane, so going full circle from Wimbledon FC, was too good to resist. So of course we accepted the invitation. We hope to start building in early 2019. We have permission for a 20,000 capacity stadium because we don't want to be choked to death if we continue to grow, but we're going to start with between 9 and 10.
Back in their first year of existence, we made a film about the club, and it was a far cry from glossy new stadiums. These were the club offices in an old print works lent to them by a supporter. The club was totally run by the fans. Chris Stewart was one of the original fans who started it, and being an accountant, was made chairman at the time.
It's a limited company owned by the Dons Trust, which is an industrial and providence society, which is effectively a co-op. We've got 2,150 members, something like that. They pay £25 to join and they get a share. They can pay, if they want to, £10,000 to join and they can have one share. And if they want to pay £1 million and join, they can have one share. So no one can buy influence in our organisation. No one can buy control.
Are you paid?
No, not by anyone at the moment.
Back then, the club operated on virtually no money and played against teams like Ash United, Frimley Green and Walton Casuals. But the fans didn't care who they played. They turned up in their droves.
In the first year, we were charging something like £9 to get in, I think, and £2 for a kid standing behind the goal. You know, we were paying the players 30 quid a week because that was the norm for that league. So we made a substantial profit that first year. Our average gate was over 3,000. In a league where the average gate was somewhere between 50 and 80.
The club was run by the fans, for the fans. On the morning of one of their first games against North Greenford, we filmed the players and coaching staff teaching youngsters football skills. AFC Wimbledon saw themselves as the total opposite of the big business that they'd seen professional football becoming.
There was a little drawing of a heart next to that, followed by an exclamation mark.
I'm the third generation in my family to support, and one of those generations, the first of those three, actually played for Wimbledon in the 30s. And I don't actually want to go and watch a home game 70 miles up the M1.
Back in that first season, things were very quickly starting to develop. Because the club were getting such big crowds, it meant that they could attract players that normally would have played at a much higher level. Joe Sheeran had played for Chelsea.
I've played with Zola, Desai, people like that. I thought, you know, this is going to be sort of step down, so it's going to be easier for me. But you've got to approach it with the same attitude that, you know, it's just as competitive. You've got to go out there with the same frame of mind as if you were playing against the best players in the world. I'm enjoying football for the first time in ages, and that's more important than the money at the moment, you know.
What this meant is that the club could go forward with an extraordinary plan much faster than anyone could believe possible. Chris is no longer chairman, but Eric took over as the chief executive.
We had a business plan that showed us getting promoted every other year up to what was then called the Conference National, which is an incredibly naive plan. But actually, we didn't do it in quite the order we'd set up, but we did it. But looking back on it, I have no idea what made us think we really could do this, because it was idealism, naivety, call it what you like, but maybe that's what did it. Nothing's made us doubt ourselves. And it took 9 years, 5 promotions from where we started, and then, wow, we're in the Football League.
So they are now an established Football League club and even have their own youth academy.
On Saturday we had a couple of players in the squad who are ex-academy. So we've had academy graduates coming through. We now have teams from 8 to 18 every year, plus a development squad which bridges the gap between the 18-year-olds and the first team, and they're mainly academy boys too. Homegrown and hungry is their motto, their strapline, and I think it's really appropriate. We want to maintain the tradition of the old Wimbledon FC that we grew around. We kept our roots, we stayed in the borough, we remained a community club. We still focus on doing things like stadium schools where kids who don't really want to go to school come in, you can get them to write a letter to their favourite player, that sort of stuff. You can bring the best out of people through the lure of football, which I think is almost unique in that respect. So we are not just a football club coming back to play in Plough Lane, we're a community club coming back to work across the whole borough and the adjacent boroughs, Wandsworth, Kingston.
The club are still very much part of the local community, but they now play at a tiny ground. So can they attract enough people to fill a new, much larger stadium?
We average about 4,500, I think, was the average gate here last season. And given our capacity is only 4,850, you know, there's room for more. Typically, when you move to a new stadium, as long as you're not promoted or relegated the season that happens, you'll go up about 50 to 60% in gates. We'll bring some people back who didn't really want to do the non-league thing or didn't want to come out with 6 or 7 miles away from the old ground where we are now. There's people who would love to come to football and can't afford to go to Premier League football or even can't get in. And there's people who'd like to support their local community-based team, and having a stadium there will allow us to expand. And I think if you're doing that, I think people get sucked in and come to the football too.
Having seen how far they've come in just 16 years, you most certainly wouldn't bet against Wimbledon one day filling that new ground.